All right, well, good evening and thank you for joining us tonight for this meeting. We are here to talk about the Phase 1 Community Air Monitoring Report since the year-long monitoring ended in June 2023. In each community, there were 2 virtual community meetings to finalize the study boundaries and 3 virtual update meetings during the monitoring to provide updates as the monitoring data were collected. Most recently, we conducted an in-person meeting to walk through the story maps to demonstrate the tool we're using to provide results in each of our 10 communities. Tonight is a makeup session for anyone who couldn't make the in-person meeting, and we'll provide the same presentation with a summary of overall findings from the communities. We can address some general questions about the results for an individual community, but if you have specific questions about sources in the data, please email us to set up a time when you can speak with one of our scientists during our office hours. So let's go to the next slide and I'll go over the agenda quick. So first we're going to give you a quick overview of the Climate Act and the initiative for those who are unfamiliar with the project. Then we'll give you a brief discussion of mobile monitoring, some overall findings from the study across the state, and then finally, we'll wrap up the meeting with important next steps, which include DEC working with the community advisory committees across the 10 communities and the Climate Justice Working Group to develop air pollution reduction strategies, which are the objective of the CAM initiative. I know your time is valuable. Our presentation is short, but just wanted to also ask that if you have questions during the presentation or right after, if you could put those in the chat and we'll address them when we're done with the presentation portion. And Emma, if you'd like to explain the meeting procedures.
Yes, thank you so much, Margaret. If we could advance to the next slide. Okay, folks, so just an FYI regarding our WebEx platform here. If you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat feature at the bottom of your screen. It's on the right-hand side. It looks like that chat bubble. Feel free to put questions in that space at any time during the presentation. Once we get through the presentation, there will be a Q&A session at the end. So we'll try to go through your questions in the order that we receive them. And if we need any sort of clarification, we will ask folks to raise their hand and you could speak further on your question. If you're joining us through phone, feel free to just press *3 to raise your hand and we can unmute you. And again, if you have any technical problems at any time during this presentation, you can give us a call at 518-402-8005 for assistance, or feel free to drop us a line in the chat and we'll try to help you. All right, thank you so much.
Thanks, Emma. And now I'm going to hand it off to one of our research scientists working on the initiative, Marilyn Worth.
Thank you, Margaret. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for your time and attention. I first want to talk a little bit more about the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act, or the Climate Act, and why we are conducting this community air monitoring. So this statewide effort was directed by the Climate Act. In 2019, the Climate Act was enacted, and it's one of the nation's most ambitious laws considering the requirements to reduce emissions and deploy clean energy. The Climate Act recognizes that there are some communities in New York that have disproportionate air pollution burdens, in addition to health and economic inequities that make them more vulnerable to the impacts of air pollution and climate change. It specifically aims to reduce air pollution burdens to improve air quality and realize benefits to increase climate resiliency in disadvantaged communities. The Act requires air monitoring in 4 disadvantaged communities, but the governor expanded it to 10, as shown on the map on this slide. 4 communities upstate, there's more communities downstate in the New York City region, and then on Long Island. Mobile monitoring was conducted for 1 year in each community using vehicles equipped with sensor technology to screen for local levels of greenhouse gases like methane and ethane and other pollutants such as particulate matter and black carbon and nitrogen oxides, which are from diesel vehicles. Along with community input and other information, DEC will use the results of this study to identify sources contributing to air pollution to inform emission and exposure reduction strategies. Some of the strategies may benefit other areas of the state not monitored in the initiative. Next slide, please. So why is air quality monitoring important? Air pollution is a complicated topic. The air we breathe contains a complex mixture of material, including air pollutants from countless sources, both natural, such as pollen from trees, and man-made, such as the pollution that comes from the burning of fossil fuels like greenhouse gases and particulate matter. Some of the air pollution comes from nearby sources like trucks and cars driving on local highways, or emissions from nearby industry. And then some of the air pollution comes from long-range sources farther away, such as the impacts from wildfire smoke that we felt strongly last summer. DEC and the EPA use air monitoring data to evaluate air pollution sources and trends to better understand air pollution levels to protect public health. For example, the Air Quality Index is a scale we use to educate the public about air quality and notify them when air quality is anticipated to be of greater health concern. And this is most helpful for sensitive individuals so they can make decisions about whether it's healthy for them to go outside. Next slide, please. So let's talk about our regulatory monitoring data. DEC measures air pollutants at more than 50 sites across the state, and 21 of these sites are in potential environmental justice areas. This slide shows how annual average fine particulate matter, or PM 2.5, that's particles that are 2.5 microns and smaller. That's about 30 times smaller than the width of a hair. This graph shows how the PM 2.5 decreased across the state. The dashed purple line is the National Ambient Air Quality Standard established by EPA for PM 2.5. You can see that EPA has tightened this standard since 1999 when the monitoring began, from 15 down to currently 9 micrograms per cubic meter. This helps limit the levels and improve air quality. The increase in 2023 is due to the wildfires. While some levels have come down for fine particulate matter, we know we have more work to do to help disadvantaged communities which can be exposed to multiple sources and pollutants. Along with tightening the standard, EPA is enhancing monitoring of PM 2.5 near vulnerable populations. Next slide, please. So we understand that people are concerned about health impacts, and traffic and the movement of goods are a known major source of air pollution. Disadvantaged communities are often burdened with more traffic due to past unjust land use decisions and the location of highways and routes for diesel vehicles traveling to commercial businesses and industrial areas. Health impacts from air pollution may be from a single pollutant or may be felt from a mixture of pollutants, as seen in this example of traffic-related air pollutants, or TRAP, as we call it, which is a mixture of gases and particles. Some of these particles come from the brake and tire wear, in addition to the exhaust. Many health studies link increased health risks from TRAP exposures, including increasing the risk of asthma and heart and lung disease. Additionally, traffic, like other sources of air pollution, can also have negative quality of life impacts, such as noise and odors. Now I'd like to pass it over to my colleague, Joe Mardo, who's going to talk to you more about our mobile air monitoring and the study results.
Thank you, Marilyn. So I'm now going to talk a little bit about mobile monitoring. Mobile monitoring provides short-term sensor measurements for many pollutants over a large area. Sensors are not regulatory monitors, and so the results represent a local screening level of sensor data to show higher and lower levels, across the community to help identify sources. Depending on the time scale that you're looking at, an air pollutant is going to behave differently. So here's an example that we're taking from the EPA Enhanced Sensor Guidebook, which is demonstrating how an air pollutant might change depending on what time scale you're looking at. The graph on the left represents, short-term measurements. So you might see hour-long measurements every 5 minutes, let's say, wherein an air pollutant concentration can change rapidly. This is going to be the situation where, you might be in an emission plume and then move out of the plume really directly and see the concentration change really rapidly as your exposure is changing very quickly. Compare that to the second plot in, which is looking over the course of a day. A lot of air pollutants are going to react in sunlight. So the example right here, this is a pollutant that might be higher at night and then go down in concentration during the middle of the day when you have a lot of photochemistry happening, when you have a lot of atmospheric chemistry happening with exposure to the sunlight. Then for the third example that we see, the third graph here, over the course of a week, some pollutants are going to be changed by human behavior, like the traffic-related air pollutants that Marilyn was talking about. So for pollutants that are coming directly out of cars, you might see a signal wherein the concentrations are higher on the days that people are driving and lower on the weekends. And lastly, over the course of a year, a lot of air pollutants are going to behave different seasonally, depending on, say, weather patterns, temperature, how much sunlight they're getting. And so your concentrations might be totally different in the summer versus the winter or in the fall. It's very complicated depending on which pollutant that you're looking at. EPA standards and many air pollutant health studies are based on the annual or the 24-hour guideline. And so our regulatory monitors are trying to give us a really robust view on how pollutants are behaving on these timescales. Compare that to low-cost sensors, which can look at even smaller timescales than what we're showing here. They might be even on the 1 minute or 1 second timescale like this study used. And we can use them in tandem with each other. We can use low-cost sensors or mobile monitoring as an example, as a way to fill in the gaps between our regulatory monitors and get an idea of what's happening within the communities away from where we have our most robust instrumentation. And so the sensors that were used in this study meet some but not all of the EPA performance targets. We evaluated the sensor performance at 2 of our regulatory monitoring sites at Queens and Rochester. And those results can be found in one of our fact sheets, Air Sensors Quality Assurance Technical Addendum, which is found in our fact sheet section of our main project page. And I'll show you where to find that in just a minute. For this study, DEC partnered with a climate tech company, Aclima, to perform 1 year of mobile monitoring. Low-emission hybrid Prius vehicles were equipped with a series of air sensors, which were measuring pollutant levels for every second as they drove through every single publicly accessible street within the study areas within the communities. Aclima linked the data to road segments, which were 100 meters in length, about 330 feet, and drove every single road segment with the goal to reach every single segment at least 20 times over the course of a year as their data quality metric. Their goal was actually to get 85% of the road segments, at least 20 times, and they met that goal across all 10 communities. The monitoring gave us 2 outputs: 1 second data for the annual for the pollutants, and then annual pollutant level road segment data, as well. And then Aclima did a whole bunch of data processing on this data to generate maps of modeled annual pollutants, which are fed into a machine learning algorithm that used the data, the segment data, to determine what is an expected concentration for the pollutants for every single one of those road segments across the communities. DEC, then we took the raw data and we developed 3 tools from the raw data to perform our own analysis on that. We call our tools peaks, focus spots, and our mobile source indicator tool. Peaks are the very high pollutant levels that repeat within the same location on multiple days. Focus spots are clustered of elevated pollutant levels that are statistically significant within the study area. And lastly, our mobile source indicator uses multi-pollutant indices to identify areas with higher impacts from vehicle emissions, both for diesel vehicles, your heavy-duty vehicles, your trucks, construction equipment, buses, as well as non-diesel vehicles, such as your passenger cars. All 4 of these tools can be used to screen for local sources. And generally, the mobile monitoring results show vehicle traffic as the most influential to local air pollution patterns, because we knew that driving on the roads and collecting data directly from the roads was going to be biased towards the mobile sources. But we've also found other patterns throughout the communities that were monitored. So now to talk a little bit about our findings. Our findings represent many of the expected local sources of pollution and some of the lived experience of community members. Across the state, higher levels of pollution were found in many areas with high amounts of vehicle traffic, especially with lots of transfer of goods. So places like ports, rail yards, and other industrial areas. We also noticed that there were specific source categories that had higher pollution levels across the state, including many facilities that deal with scrap metal processing, such as metal recyclers, waste transfer stations, and vehicle dismantlers. And many of these are just some of the general highest level results. You can find more specific results in our fact sheets. But then moving forward, this is part of the discussion that we want to have with the tools that we've generated here. So this is just kind of some of the greatest hits of the overall findings, but within the communities, there's a lot more to dig into with the data. This figure right here shows the modeled annual pollutant levels for all of the road segments within the study area using the sensor measurements. Each dot on this figure represents a single road segment. And then the black bars across communities show what the DEC regulatory monitor, what the annual mean was for PM 2.5 within that community. And then the dashed line represents the National Ambient Air Quality Standard, the same as Marilyn was talking about earlier. So what this shows is that most of our communities are doing reasonably well at staying underneath the ambient air quality standard. However, several of the communities did have road segments where the concentration was actually above this standard level. So the concentrations that were measured, based on the modeling, it's not a direct comparison to our air quality standards, but it is contextually important. These are the areas that we can start to think about what's going on there and what are the sorts of interventions that might make sense. These are the first places that we look for to try to identify sources. So moving on with the results, one of the exciting things with this study is that we have published a series of story maps as our part one report. So this was published back in mid-August and has been available right now. You can check out the QR code on the screen. We're also going to have someone put the link to the story maps in the chat. And basically the idea with this is that for our phase one report, we've generated a digital platform wherein you can explore the data, you can see what's going on in the communities, get some context. And our idea is that these work across devices. This is kind of a collaborative tool that we can all use together to start to work towards air pollution intervention strategies. So I'm going to now go away from the presentation and give a quick tour of the story maps right here. All right, so we also have a shortened link to get to the project page, which we'll also put in the chat here. It's on on.ny.gov/CAM in all caps. And that's going to get you directly to this project page. On here, you're going to find some really great information. So we have two YouTube videos that are accompanying this project, our whole series of story maps. As was alluded to earlier, we have just finished a series of going out to all 10 communities to give in-person public meetings. We have done office hours as part of this initiative, and if you are interested in more office hours and want some access to the science team, we're absolutely willing to schedule a time to meet with you. You can just email us or give us a phone call, and we'll set that up. But I wanted to go to the bottom of this page right here, because here's where we have a whole series of fact sheets that accompany the project as a whole, including our air quality assurance technical addendum, and other fact sheets that are pretty important as well. For instance, our methane fact sheet, which describes what would be done if we identified a natural gas leak as part of this study. So these have some really great information. There's also a glossary of terms. So if you're unfamiliar with, say, what black carbon means, what that definition is, our glossary is going to have definitions such as that. I'm now going to scroll back up, and we are going to go into the story maps. So the story maps are all in this one integrated platform on ArcGIS Online, and you get taken directly to this landing page, which gives an overview of the study and then shows all of our story maps on the right here. We have an overview of the study, which describes what this initiative is, what is mobile monitoring, and how to explore these story maps and things like that. Then we have 10 pages for each of the 10 communities. going through the specific history of that community, what are the community specific outcomes, things like that. We have 4 story maps for our different methods: our peaks analysis, our focus spot tool, our mobile source indicator tool, and ACLIMA's annual pollutant levels. And so you can explore each one of those and get an idea of how we go from the data to an actual mapped result for that method. And then lastly, we have our community air monitoring mapping tool, which is a very powerful tool that allows you to explore all of the data layers at your own leisure. And the idea with this is that it's truly a collaborative tool where you can generate maps, take screenshots, share them, explore the data. And it's a really great tool that we can start to use to get everyone on the same page and work together towards solutions. So I'm just going to jump into one of the community story maps here to give an overview of what these look like. And this meeting, I'm going to be pretty brief because you can explore these at your own time. But I do want to just give you a kind of benchmark on what you're going to find within these. So we start off with a community profile, which gives the history of the community, as well as what is the industry that's there, and some of the overview of, how we got to where we are in that community, with its, in terms of air pollution, in terms of its makeup, in terms of who lives there and what it's like there a little bit. Next, we move on to talk about historic redlining. So this is a very important contextual layer that was part of the disadvantaged communities criteria. And we wanted to show these maps to demonstrate that even though this is a practice that was outlawed, in the mid 50s, and completely outlawed by the Fair Housing Act, we're still seeing the effects of redlining to this day in a lot of the ways that air pollution is felt within our communities and the ways that inequities are felt in the communities. So it's a very important contextual layer. Then we talk about some of our air pollution sources that have been identified in each of these communities. And I'm going to scroll on right through to go over to the results. So within our results, we wanted to give a very brief tour of some of the results specific to that community. So what we did is we generated what's called a mapping tour, wherein we'll jump to a specific part of the map and we'll give you these toggle buttons, which allow you to play with the different layers here. And the idea is you can get an idea for how we as scientists, look at the data when we're exploring these different maps here. So for example, you can toggle between diesel and non-diesel. You can turn on layers like our focus spots and find areas that have evidence of high pollution exposure. You can click on any of these focus spots, for example, to get more contextual information about what's specifically happening at that location. You can turn on peaks and find out where are the areas that have repeat high pollution levels. With any of the peaks, for example, you can click on this and it will tell you what pollutant it is, what the maximum concentration observed was, and also jump right to a Google Street View for that location. And then we repeat this process a couple of times for a couple of specific examples within each of the communities. So it's not meant to be exhaustive, but it is meant to give you an idea of how we are exploring the data. I also want to highlight down beyond the results, we have a community survey, and we're going to put a link to the community survey in the chat as well. So this is going to be open until December 31st, 2024, the end of this year. And the idea is that if you go into the survey, it's very brief. It's just 4 brief pages of questions. And we want you to give us feedback about air pollution sources or problems that you may have identified within your community. So this does allow for anonymous results if you don't want to necessarily be named. But you can also say add pictures if you know that there's a specific location that you think is a problem. The more information that we know, the better we can help start to address these air quality issues. And these are also going to be shared with our co-conveners out within the different communities as well. Then we move on to next steps as the last part of the story map tour. I'm going to go back up to results. And then I'm going to jump into the community air monitoring map. So I alluded to this earlier. This is our full-on mapping experience. And I'm just going to jump to a different community just to maybe show how about this case. So I just want to show some of the functionality of this really quickly to demonstrate what can be done with this tool. Before I do that, I do want to highlight on the top right here this little icon that says I. If you click on that, you get an about page that tells you about what this tool is. It also has a link to a tutorial window, which tells you how to use some of the functionality here. Going back, we also have information about the layers here. So, for example, one of the layers that we talked about is sensitive receptors, which are areas where sensitive populations are likely to congregate, areas where you see lots of individuals like children or the elderly or people with health conditions. So these are places like childcare facilities, healthcare, libraries, playgrounds. If you want to know how any of these layers were generated or what they mean or where they come from, this is where you're going to find some of that information. And then lastly, we also have a link to all of our fact sheets on here as well. So with the mapping tool, as I said before, all of our layers are available to play with. So you can say turn on sensitive receptors, zoom into an area, and you're going to get to see all of the sensitive receptors that are within that area. You can then jump over to the legend. It's going to take a minute. There we go. And it will update with the information that we have here. So, for example, if you wanted to look and see what are, say, the annual PM 2.5 concentrations looking like within the Buffalo community, you could turn that on. You know, you can play around. You can turn on permitted sources, which are any locations that have an air permit from DEC. You can toggle between all of the different pollutants. And then you can also change between all of the different tools that we have between our peaks, focus spots, annual pollutant levels, etc. All right, so I'm going to now jump back to the presentation and we're going to pass it off to the Office of Environmental Justice to talk about some of our next steps.
Thank you, Dr. Marto. Hi, everyone. Good evening. My name is Adriana Espinosa, Deputy Commissioner for Equity and Justice at DEC. We've got a few more slides to go through, and then we will open it up. I did start to see some questions in the chat, and would encourage folks that even while we're still speaking, please feel free to throw those any questions you have into the chat, and we'll get to them momentarily. Okay. So this slide here lists out the next steps. These are the deliverables that the state is required to deliver on. And if we look here at phase 1, this is where we are right now. These are the story maps that our team just went through now, where we released the summaries of the air monitoring and the results via these interactive websites that we just walked you through. And this is actually our last meeting. We just completed a tour across the state where we had this meeting in 10 different areas of parts of the study areas all over the state. And so now after this meeting, we are really kicking off into the next phase of this work, which we're calling the DEC Communities Report. And this is where we want to take this data and that we got from the monitoring and make sure that we are using that to engage with folks about your own air quality priorities in order for the state to make sure that the mitigation that we recommend are driven by, are community driven. And informed by lived experiences of folks on the ground. That is something we are teeing up for the summer of next year, where we want to sort of, again, lay out the community priorities based on what we've learned from the study. And then the final deliverable that we have under the law is statewide air pollution reduction strategies. So those are sort of the final strategies statewide for improving air quality in disadvantaged communities across the state. And that document does have to be developed in consultation with the state's climate justice working group. Next slide, please. Okay, so how do we go from where we are now through all of those different deliverables on the timeline that I went through? Essentially, how do you go from study to solutions? And so I think just to get a little bit more in depth about what we're thinking about the communities report is that we really have focused this fall on education and outreach and making sure we are providing space for folks to know about this study, understand the sources, how to analyze and think about the findings in order to identify areas of concern, sensitive populations that we need to be aware about, identifying sources within the data, excuse me, and then use that to formulate community-driven recommendations. So what are the types of strategies that you all want to see, actions you want to see the state take based off this data? And the plate is really wide open right now in thinking about, pushing for things like investments in like physical infrastructure, things about changing, maybe thinking about truck routes and the movement of goods as part of this, regulatory or enforcement action. I think we're really open to understanding your specific community needs and priorities from this information. And then we want to take that to help inform the work that we do at the state level, which is to take those community priorities and help to assess, okay, how do we build programs, initiatives, and investments in order to deliver on those priorities? How do we identifying existing programs, maybe even developing new programs, and who are the folks that have to be in the room? What are the different jurisdictions here at the table? And I think so that's how we hope to use the communities report is to help figure out, okay, how do we take those priorities and then drive resources and benefits to actually address the issues that we've heard here. Next slide. Okay, so this is a really high-level slide on what we think community engagement can look like through this next phase. We're in the fall right now. I think I mentioned earlier that we're looking to complete a communities report in the summer of next year. That is no easy feat, and we're really serious about wanting to support community involvement in how we identify the focus areas and priorities and how we develop those emission reduction strategies. And how we've been engaging so far through this process is we've been meeting at the pretty local level. Like every study area, we have tried to develop a community advisory committee and identify local partners that helped us, gave us feedback on the proposed boundaries, help us identify sensitive populations throughout this process, and who we reported out to as we were getting preliminary findings for this data. And as we are thinking about now transitioning into mitigation phase, I think what we're thinking now is to bring folks together to build as big of a table as possible. And so instead of 10 separate advisory committees, building a statewide community advisory committee that can really help us drive down, no pun intended, on our air pollution issues and our strategies to address them here. We also recognize that government has a large role to play here, including but not limited to the Department of Environmental Conservation. So one thing that we've seen as our team has analyzed this data is that there may be opportunities for interventions or mitigation that may be beyond DEC's jurisdiction or our regulatory authority. And that it's imperative if we want to be successful in improving air quality in disadvantaged communities, we have to bring other governmental entities to the table. And so we are proposing to form an interagency working group to help identify the people who have policymaking and regulatory and other resources to help us act on these strategies. And then just to name some of the challenges here, I think, like I said, it's no easy feat to go from releasing the data in the fall to communities report in the summer. And I think one of our ongoing challenges is that we're committed to action on throughout is one is data accessibility. in order to be successful, we have to make sure the tools that we develop, the language that we're using, the materials that are coming out from this process are easily understandable and meet folks where they are on air quality. And so making sure folks understand how to use the tools and understand what this data can and can't be used for, and how to interpret it. And another challenge we have is community participation. We've had really good turnout as we've gone across the state and held these meetings, but that has to be sustained for us to really meet our goal of having the mitigation strategies be community solutions oriented and driven based on your priorities. And so we'll continue to keep trying to create the space for community members to come together, and we're always looking for ways to improve and meet people where they are. Next slide. Okay, so what resources is the state putting together for this engagement that I just laid out? One opportunity that I wanted to mention is the Office of Environmental Justice. It has an open grant opportunity right now, capacity building and community air monitoring grants. I believe that is about $3 million in available grant funding right now. Those are competitive grants. And the Office of Environmental Justice, I think, intentionally tried to design a very broad set of eligibility guidelines for that grant program, because we wanted to be able to support community-based environmental justice organizations who have long been doing community air monitoring work. And so some eligible items underneath this grant opportunity could include items like you're implementing your own mitigation strategies in your community. And it can also be organizing local leaders and organizing your neighbors to do air quality improvement community planning in your own neighborhood. And so we hope that can help build bandwidth and support for this work. So there is a QR code here where you can learn more about that grant opportunity, but that's one, I think, major resource, and our Office of Environmental Justice also has done this, I think, throughout the entirety of the program to make sure that we're supporting community-based organizations alongside this state-driven air monitoring study. We also have office hours that the Division of Air Resources, I think they referenced earlier, that they've put together in order to, again, focus on that data accessibility. And so you can actually sign up just like you did in school for office hours to meet with some of our research scientists and go through the map and ask them questions and understand how to use the map and what does this data mean and what is black carbon and what does that mean for my neighborhood. You can sign up for a meeting with them through the office hours. So that's another, I think, valuable resource that we're bringing. Also, with that interagency working group, that is providing for a space for the state agency collaboration that is paramount to the success of this program. And also our partnerships with local leaders. So we've identified local leaders in every study area, and we've been leaning on them to help identify who the key stakeholders are in the study area, what are the major nonprofit or environmental organizations that we need to be working with, and helping us to really understand and meet the community where they are. And so that work will continue and is really a valuable resource for folks who, maybe want to work with their local leaders who know their neighborhoods like they do in this work. And then finally, I will just re-up what Dr. Mardo had mentioned towards the end, is that we have an online survey tool, and there's a QR code here on the slide for that. That is where you can provide us feedback on how the maps are working, what features are there or not there that you would expect to see. How is it working for you? How is it meeting your needs for being able to identify, again, the issues, the air quality issues in your community, and help and how can it be improved? That's open through the end of the year, and I strongly encourage folks to to use that tool to provide feedback so we can continuously upgrade or update the item. Next slide. All right. And with that, I am happy to open it up to questions for anyone. We've got our team of research scientists here in addition to folks from the Office of Environmental Justice. And so I think we had one in the chat, so I'll start there, but folks, feel free to raise your hand or put your question in the chat. But I have a question from Jeffrey. Can someone speak about heat islands and how they contribute to air pollution? Joe or Margaret, you want to take that one?
Sure, I can take that. So one of the pollutants that was measured and something that people usually call smog, ozone, is a pollutant that's formed from a mix of other pollutants, but it needs heat and sunshine for reactions to occur for ozone values at ground level to increase. Also, just increasing the heat in these urban areas also leads to the increase in electricity demand for air conditioning, and the nearby power plants or smaller peaker units will contribute to air pollution. And Jeffrey Sanoff asked this question, do you have any follow-up, or did that answer your question? And I don't know if you're unmuted or not, but okay, if not, throw something in the chat or raise your hand and we'll get back to you.
Thanks, Margaret. Another question I see from Peter King. Aiming for the moon here, is there some potential for advanced community transportation planning? For example, making a local case for improving transit access and implementing affordable transit-oriented development. Likely at that point, it goes way beyond DEC. I can take that one, and then other folks, please feel free to chime in. I think you're exactly right. I think DEC in our role, we don't do transportation planning, certainly not for the local level. But this, I think, is exactly why we recognize the need to create an interagency working group as part of the mitigation phase, especially because some of the sources that we went through did indicate that these are heavily mobile source of air pollution here. And so traffic is driving a lot of what we're seeing. And so we want to put the best solutions forward and bring the right people to the table that have the ability to act on those, even when they're not DEC. And so I think we fully anticipate, or at least our vision for the interagency working group is to bring folks like DOT and the MTA and others, so that we can raise up what are those opportunities to reduce transportation emissions beyond what DEC can do within our regulatory authority. So thank you for your question. Anyone else want to chime in on that one?
I think that's right, Adriana. I think you've got that. Jeffrey does have his hand raised. So Jeffrey, Emma, if you could unmute Jeffrey so that we can go back to see if he needs clarification on his question.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you. I live in the southern part of Brooklyn, Coney Island, Brighton Beach. It's also a disadvantaged area. And I was disappointed. I've said this before to other meetings. I was disappointed that the study wasn't done south of the Belt Parkway, just north of the Belt Parkway. Now, on the issue of heat islands, the Parks Department, I live right on the boardwalk, and it's a 2.5 mile stretch, and most of it is wood now, but they're starting to put more concrete and more concrete, plastic over concrete, which is going to create a 2.5 mile heat island, okay, which is going to affect the residents here who suffer from asthma and other pulmonary and breathing problems. So I see that, you want to get together with other agencies, but what you're going to do to try to mitigate these issues is also going to be is also going to go against what you're trying to mitigate the issues. If they want to, so maybe DEC should have a talk with New York City Parks Department on what they want to do with this boardwalk. Heat Islands is a big problem that people don't really, it isn't on their radar.
Thank you.
So-
I appreciate you raising some of the intersectional issues here, and it's good to talk to you again, Jeffrey. I think that we met when you were in Brooklyn at the Brooklyn meeting. So I think that's a good point for more folks to bring to the table. We certainly have engaged with New York City and a couple of different agencies. I'm unsure if we've connected with parks specifically. So I think your point is noted, and we can follow up with them. Sorry, were you trying to add something, Margaret?
I just wanted to mention that the state has also developed an extreme heat action plan, and we understand that air pollution and extreme heat do have some intersecting issues, and we will be working with them to make sure that we don't want to make air pollution worse. We don't want to we want to make sure that people have someplace to get some relief from the heat and enjoy some indoor air if needed during those extreme heat events. So that is one of the things that is in the back of our mind.
Awesome. Thank you, Margaret. Another question from Josh Randall. Are the vectors for story maps able to be downloaded? Joe, I'll go to you for that one.
And basically, right now they are not in a publicly shared format that they can be downloaded, but that's definitely something that we can talk about. So if you want any of the raw data or those shape files, we do request that you make a FOIL request. And we're trying to make sure that those have a really quick turnaround. So we can get those to you. We just request that you go through that process for that.
Great. All right. Let's see. Oh, I think sticking with Josh, there's another question from Josh in the chat. How will the next steps of planning intersect with other divisions of DEC, especially air permits and brownfields on the state registry? So I think just kick that off myself, but then turn it to Margaret. I think we've already got an intersecting team of DEC represented here on this call. We have built an intra-agency team from the very beginning to work on this effort. I have my team here from the Office of Environmental Justice. We have the technical team is the Division of Air Resources. And so those are the folks that do work on our air permits. And so we've got full commitment up through the commissioner's level to think creatively about how we can resolve air pollution burdens or advance improving air quality in disadvantaged communities through out regions and divisions and programs at the agency. Anything to add, Margaret?
I think you covered most of it. But certainly, we will be making all the other divisions at DEC aware of the study results and working with them to make sure that they consider those results going forward. And we may need to pull in some other divisions when we are working on our solutions.
Awesome. Okay, I think I will tee up this next one for you as well, Margaret. We have a concern here about an expressway in Buffalo, and the question is, if our study suggests current pollution levels in this area of Buffalo is already high, might or should that factor into the decision to move forward with a proposed 2-mile tunnel project along a Buffalo Expressway?
Sure. And, as you mentioned in your question, there is some ongoing litigation, so we kind of have to walk a little fine line here. But certainly the use of this data, as we said all along, is to identify sources of air pollution and to find ways to mitigate the impacts from air pollution in those areas. So certainly what our study shows is that that area along the expressway currently is showing impacts from transportation. That is very similar to what we've seen across the state. And one of our objectives here is to find ways to mitigate those impacts. And so we are looking for feedback and looking to find ways to improve air pollution, especially along busy highways.
Awesome. Okay. Kimberly says, with the construction boom in areas such as downtown Brooklyn, is there informed indoor air quality monitoring occurring that may be impacted by both indoor and outdoor sources? I'm going to turn that to the air team.
Sure. So I'll start and anybody else can jump in. But the Division of Air Resources is not aware of any routine indoor air quality monitoring. I believe the monitoring that's happening in some areas of Brooklyn, our Division of Remediation is providing some limited air monitoring for very specific pollutants related to the contamination. And that's I don't have any detailed information about that, but we can certainly follow up and connect you with somebody in remediation that might have more information.
Maybe a follow-up question of my own on that
Sure.
topic is, do we have, in the data that we did collect, does it suggest any of the sources that we're looking at are coming from indoor sources of air pollution?
So I believe this issue is we did not collect pollutants that would be caught by this, but for the most part, I would say indoor air pollution doesn't affect outdoor air pollution so much as the other way around. And again, indoor air pollution, Division of Air, we look at outdoor air pollution, but Department of Health and sometimes our Division of Remediation does look at indoor air. And somebody else just chimed in there. They're monitoring for very specific volatile organic compounds from soil contamination. So our project did not monitor those.
Got it. And thank you. That's a good reminder that I think what we see is the other way around, of outdoor impacting indoor and less the other way.
Yeah.
Thank you for that answer. Those are the only questions that I've seen come through the chat. Do we have any hands? I don't see hands up. Folks, if you want to raise your hand to ask a question, we are happy to take a few more questions. Let's see. We just got another one in the chat. Peter, as I understand, DEC grants could be tapped for monitoring indoor air quality, right? I think I would point that one to Alana, who is here and worked on that, has her team working on that.
Yep. Hi, this is Alana Cadell-Tucky. I'm the director for the Office of Environmental Justice here at DEC. We do have a variety of grants in our Office of Environmental Justice that could definitely be used to monitor indoor air quality. We work in partnership with our team here at Air Resources to assure that, you know, we're not engineers in Office of Environmental Justice, so we obviously are not the best people to identify exactly what equipment is should be identified, but we do have a pretty good relationship, and we've built a good solid foundation with the air team when it comes to these grants. So our community impact grant is probably the best bet, because that is our most popular, and it's also our most sort of utilitarian grant, in that you can basically use it for just about anything that is related to environmental justice for the mitigation of environmental harms. So that is something that if you're interested, we did just close our community impact grant just recently, but we will be offering it again in 2025. So probably sometime in the spring. So summer. So I would advise you to keep an eye out for that. But yes, if you did present us, I can't don't give us any specifics, but if you, that is something that we could potentially fund through that particular grant.
Thanks, Alana. All right. And I would also just point out, I'm not sure if Alana covered this, but New York State Department of Health tends to focus on indoor air quality where DEC does outdoor. And so I think if there's a specific concern that you would have about indoor air quality, definitely would encourage you to reach out to the Department of Health about that. In addition to exploring the grant opportunities, of course, that you mentioned. All right. Anything else?
I see that Peter did specify, he entered some specific information. Peter, if you wouldn't mind just emailing that question to the justice@dec.ny.gov email address, and I can make sure that we double check on that.
Great. Good catch. I missed that one. I think another one just came through as well from Josh. Clean Air Coalition has reported that Western New York has a very high number of permits that don't see full formal review. Would the new plan help determine which permits need greater scrutiny? Also, 18 Mile Creek Superfund had air monitoring, but no public data. Are there ways for these grant/plans to ensure that change, or are short-term air issues not included? So there's a lot in there, so it might need a couple of different people to respond just to different parts of that. I think, as I mentioned earlier, everything is on the table for consideration and how you want to see the state respond to improve air quality in your community and address sources that were identified through this program. So anything we're open to hearing from at this point. We want to make sure we're casting a really wide net right now. And that includes understanding and hearing from New Yorkers on what you think this should mean for permit reviews. So a little bit separate from the community air monitoring initiative itself, I will mention that there are policies that are new or also being worked on right now in regards to how the agency reviews permits before us in disadvantaged communities. Another part of the same law we're working on is Section 7.3 of the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act, which requires that DEC and no state agency or authority can disproportionately burden a disadvantaged community with our decision making. And our agency spent a number of years working on developing a policy on how to implement that within our permitting authority. And we finalized not so long ago a policy called DEP 24-1, which lays out our process for how we are going to ensure that DEC's permit decision making doesn't disproportionately burden disadvantaged communities. So that is one mechanism that we have to ensure, to use your term, greater scrutiny, but ensures equitable review really in permitting for certain applicable permits in disadvantaged communities. So that's one way. There's also additional regulations that we're working on right now that are similar, related to the environmental justice siting law that goes into effect at the end of this year, which is really similar and requires the agency or requires applicants for DEC permits to develop an existing burden report when they are proposing an activity or need a permit from the agency in disadvantaged communities. They have to not only consider the impact of their facility on that community, but also the existing burdens in that community, the other sources of pollution and vulnerabilities that may also exist. And so I think those are some other policies that aren't directly linked to the community air monitoring initiative, but may get at what you're speaking at here. Does anybody else want to comment on any of that?
I'll add a little bit to it. We are taking a look at the results, and for the most part, as we said, we're seeing transportation related sources as the primary source for many of the study areas. However, you know, we've seen some areas where it's clusters of stationary sources, and we're sharing that information with our regional offices and asking them to go out and do an inspection and see if there is anything that's going on that maybe we may need to address sooner. I will also say that, you know, like many other companies and government agencies, COVID hit DEC hard. We lost a lot of staff, but we have been building up that staff over the last couple of years, and the Region 9 office, our Western New York office, has new staff to, and their priority is working on that permitting backlog. And then I think the other piece of that question on the Superfund having air monitoring but no public data. So remediation, that division of remediation, they sometimes do require air monitoring. Again, so that is something that we can take back to Division of Remediation and see if they have more information on that. And then I think, Josh, if we could unmute you, if you wanted to clarify if, you know, if there's anything else you wanted to clarify, and I think there was a little confusion on part of your question.
On that second one, I did make this point as a public comment during the 18 Mile Creek proceedings that have been happening recently. My understanding of what the issue is that yes, they are doing 24/7 air monitoring at the site during the construction there, but because it's being led by Army Corps of Engineers as opposed to EPA, and that Army Corps is subcontracted the work out, they're not going to make that data public till after the fact. I drive past the site every day, and you know, which is I'm not the sort of the high risk group, but it's something that that was previously a park, and you know, sort of concerns for people that are in the area. People that directly live there are supposed to have direct communication with the team that's doing the remediation, but I just have concerns, especially, you know, what does this look like in other Superfund sites? How do we make sure that, you know, people are actually having those direct connections, especially if we're not able to just have, you know, 24/7 access to the data that they're already collecting?
Sure. And I will say with some monitoring, and I'm not sure if this is the case for the monitoring that's happening here, some monitoring, we can't get that data live for a number of reasons. Telecommunications, you know, maybe it's something that has to be downloaded, but other data sometimes needs to go back to a lab to get analyzed. So there could be reasons why it's not available to the public on a you know, on a platform that's easily accessible right now, and why it might be only available at the end. But I don't have any specifics on this project, so can't really speak to the why.
Yeah, I don't either on the specifics, but I'm happy to try to get you an answer. So I don't know if you want to either DM us your email address, or if you'd like, you can email us. I always forget the CAM email.
clcpa.cam@ny.dec.gov.
Awesome, great. Oh, I just got your email. Okay, so
Great.
we don't have the specifics on that specific site, but I'm happy to try to connect you with the right person to get you some information about what is publicly available. related to that site.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Okay, so Peter, this is more of a comment, I believe, than a question, but Peter King wrote that this question arose with the DOT's I-81 project in Syracuse, and he said he thinks DOT is implementing some place for residents to bring their air quality dust concerns on an ongoing basis during the I-81 project.
Great. Thanks for the info. All right, I don't see any other questions. Let me check for raised hands. Happy to stay on for a little bit longer if folks did want to unmute and ask anything or raise your hand. If not, be happy to close out. I did want to say there's some really good discussion here and good thoughts in the chat about I really like to hear that some of the folks on the call were thinking ahead about like solutions to air quality concerns that you have. And I wanted to just plug that we're now that we're wrapping up this phase, like these meetings, we're going to be moving into identifying what those solutions are. And there's still time to join the community advisory committee. We're working on, trying to again develop a statewide committee that works on this. And we'll need folks from all parts of the study area in all 10 communities, and maybe those that even were left out of the study but still have air quality concerns for their community. So if you want to join, please email clcpa.cam@dec.ny.gov and we will plug you in once we kick off that effort very soon. Anything else you want to add, Margaret?
No, I think that's it. Just thank you for joining us, and hopefully we hear more from you soon.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Thanks.
Bye.
Night.